Hi, welcome to the award-winning Ed Brown Show. Hey, everything is hot everywhere in the world. And this is an international show here in 2015 that we started here with, one of our important resources here is Michael Braxton, retired service, what is it?
Foreign service.
Foreign service, retired foreign service. Now, he's going to give us enlighten us a little bit on what's going on, what's really going on. And you may say, international, I don't want to be bothered with it. I'm worried about the snow or whatever, But eventually, the international problems are going to affect your pocketbook, through arms. And you see where Obama there he's passing out the drones, talking about that. Those drones cost money. And who makes it? Yeah, United States. So, hey, look, you better listen to the show because we got an expert here that's going to tell you to start being aware of the international world. Because we're going to start with, Iran. Iran's not in it now, but hey, look, what's happening now? Tell us, Michael.
Well, actually, they're at a point in the negotiations where they're pausing to see whether they're going to continue. And we just don't know what the next steps will be. The U.S. agenda, of course, is to ensure that the Iranians remain incapable of producing a bomb.
Is that the only thing we're worried about? What about passing that information on to other Arab nations?
Iran is suspected of having passed that on to other nations in the past. And if it has the expertise, I think the assumption is if it has the expertise to make a bomb and it's capable of passing it on and making a profit, it will do so.
What country would you say is capable of manufacturing a bomb of that nature?
Well, there's several countries that are supposedly in that club. We know that we know of the United States, France, Britain,
and Russia,
China. After that, it gets a little bit sketchy and dodgy, but we know that there is a tier or a coterie of nations suspected of having the capability. Right.
Well, what do you think that with Libya popping up now? Libya is starting to show their face.
Libya is interesting, and I don't know a great deal about Libya, so I want to preface it with that. But we know that it's a highly tribalized society, and we know that it's been penetrated by extremists.
When you say extremists, is this religious or just political?
In the first instance, I think we have to say political. In the second instance, for reasons of recruitment and propaganda, they would insist that they are Islamic extremists.
Okay.
We need, as thinking people, we need to make a distinction between which adjectives satisfy their purposes and which adjectives satisfy our own purposes for analysis.
Well, what do you think of this deal with the Russians, and this peace? I think this peace pact that had with Ukraine, it's not even a week old, and they're having problems.
Negotiating with the Russians when they are in a position of power has always been difficult.
Negative.
Well, I don't want to say negative, but it's always been difficult.
You usually don't get all you want.
There is a very famous instance in which let me take you through a little bit of history here. In 1904, 1905, the Russians and the Japanese fought a war. It's called the Russo-Japanese War. At the beginning of that war, the Russians, who wanted Manchuria, promised that they would withdraw their troops from Manchuria. At the time they were making that promise, they sent division after division disguised as woodcutters into Manchuria. The Japanese finally figured that out, became exasperated, and attacked the woodcutters, quote unquote. Mm-hmm. Dealing with the Russians when they're in a powerful position has always been problematic, shall we say? Mm-hmm. And the Ukrainians, unfortunately, are the ones who are suffering on the short end now. Several years ago, it was the Georgians.
Yeah, they took over Georgia. Well, actually, what they did is that they blocked the sea there on the border of the country, and that was to keep the West from getting into the strait there near the Georgians. You remember the strait?
Sure.
Yeah, and they kept the ships and everything out of that area, so Georgia actually wouldn't have any help. No help could get into them, although they wanted help, and we actually want to help them.
Yeah, Georgia has. Georgia was one of my focal points when I was in college. Mm-hmm. Georgia has always had this had this role of being dependent upon Russia, either for protection or defense. And now that it's an independent state, that traditional relationship is beginning to hurt Georgian interests. Mm-hmm. I think it's worth adding that at the end of World War II, the Ukraine was not entirely comfortable, shall we say, with its relationship with Moscow and with Russia, and it took them 4 to 5 years to pacify the Western Ukraine and get it back into the Soviet Union.
Well, what was the relationship between Georgia and Ukraine? They're located next to each other, borders.
When I was doing Russian studies, I came upon an interesting vignette on inter-republic trade between Ukraine and Georgia.
Yeah.
The Ukraine sent a goods train, a train packed with goods that the Georgians had requested. Mm-hmm. And the train, as far as the Ukrainians were concerned, arrived, but they heard nothing from the Georgians. Mm. So they sent a complaint to Moscow Central. Not only have our goods disappeared, but our train, our rolling stock has disappeared as well.
Wow.
So that's a little bit.
A train loaded with.
Maybe the word problematic doesn't cover it.
Right, right. I can see. So they have no relationship.
They do have a relationship. They had a relationship.
To the point that they would fight for each other.
Well, it probably doesn't get to that.
They would fight Russia. You know, the two of them would fight against Russian rule.
We know that when Georgia was in trouble with Russia,
Ukraine didn't show up.
But the Baltic states did, and they offered their computer assistance expertise to deflect the computer hacking attacks that Russia was believed to have used against Georgia to degrade their military command and control. Mm-hmm. And they did a pretty good job of it.
Well, is that why the Georgians haven't said a word during this problem that Russia is having with the Ukraine? They haven't gotten involved one way or the other.
Well, I suppose, and
they're neighbors.
It's pure speculation. Mm-hmm. It's pure speculation, but one would have to ask, what does Georgia have to offer?
Right. Well, manpower. If not Anything else?
It's a tiny state made tinier by the territorial concessions it had to make to Russia after
Oh,
its
I see. I
conflict.
see.
Yeah,
Okay. So they
in
made
2008.
they made concessions to the Russians after the conflict.
The Russians forced concessions, territorial concessions, onto them.
Actually took the land. That's what it
Yeah, that's
sounds
right.
like.
That's right.
I mean, let's say what it is. You know.
Well, the Russians would argue that the people on that land were harassed by the Georgian state, and they had appealed to Russia for protection, and Russia gave them the protection they requested.
So there was sort of a trade-off there.
It was made
Wasn't
to look.
voluntarily.
It was made to look like a
Like a
trade-off.
trade-off, yeah.
Right.
Not voluntarily, though.
Protecting Russian speakers in other peripheral states has been a cardinal principle in Russian foreign policy. So if you find a group of people who claim that the local government is oppressing them and they appeal to Russia for assistance,
That means you're going to accept their policy. You're going to accept their type of philosophy.
well, if you appeal to Russia for assistance, and the Russians feel that militarily they can prevail against the local state, then you've got an invasion.
Yeah. Well, that's what the people in Georgia and Ukraine. That's what they were yelling. And the Russians were saying, okay, we have Russian citizens in your country, and we're going to protect the Russian citizens in your country.
Precisely. And in my previous example, if those woodcutters had become citizens of Manchuria,
Yeah, right.
what would the argument have been then?
Yeah. Well, it seems like a nonviolent plan to grab some land. It reminds me of something around the United States with the Indians and the settlers. You know, they use that as something to justify grabbing land.
Mr. Brown, you aren't suggesting that this is the Russian version of Manifest Destiny, are you?
Oh, well, it's close to it. You know what I mean? But it's very odd. I just look at that. And most Americans, they have a tendency not to want to get into international. What do you think? Don't you think they should put more emphasis on, or get their representative in Congress, put more interest in the international world? Because what happens is that the Americans, they have a tendency, they're going to pay for it.
Well, yeah.
In the end.
And I think you're making a good point here. And the Greek negotiations, Greece, in its negotiations with the European Union, is a case in point. If Greece withdraws from the euro, then there are going to be complications for the international economy. If it remains intransigent and remains within the European fold, financial fold, they're probably going to be problems for the international economy, and the U.S. economy will be buffeted in some way.
Yeah, because you just look at this peace agreement that Ukraine signed with the Russians. And I thought it was odd that the United States wasn't involved in that. It was Germany and France that were involved in that particular pact that they made. Now, what kind of sign is that? Where was the Western world? Where was the Europe? The Europe Union? What do you call it?
The European Union?
European Union. And financially, when those things happen, I always notice that financing is on the back burner. I mean, they have a tendency, and then they look to agencies like the NATO and all like that for money. And when you talk about that, then we get involved. Americans get involved in it supplying money. Maybe we don't have boots on the ground, but most of the things that they used in the war are actually manufactured in the United States.
Well, I want to slice that up a little bit because I think the leading issue is why did France and Germany take the lead on these negotiations with the Russians?
You're right.
And followed by a clear-cut attack by the pro-Moscow rebels against the Ukrainians.
Right.
And I think what we have here is a divergence between financial and economic leverage and political military leverage. The U.S. has been fairly strident and determined about how the Russians should behave vis-a-vis the Ukraine. And there is a little bit of daylight between, at least in my own view, there is a little bit of daylight between the French and German position, which principally has financial and economic leverage and trade leverage.
Yes, especially Germany.
And the particularly Germany.
In America.
And the American viewpoint, which is very tough comparatively, and will not tolerate the shenanigans that at least in my word shenanigans of the Russians agreeing to something, saying that they're not really involved militarily with identifiable Russian units on Ukrainian territory, and not acknowledging that.
Right. And I just wondered that their meeting, Russia, France, and Germany, those are three big wheels in the European deal over there. As far as finance, as far as capabilities of war and things of that nature.
Well, there's another point here. From the Russian point of view is really, really interesting, because if we go back to the history of World War II, the Russians fought and died on Ukrainian territory. And the way the Russians see it is not necessarily the legalistic lens that we see this action. The Russians arguably feel that they're recapturing territory that used to belong to them.
Exactly. Right.
And there's also the fact that Kiev, there is a phrase in Russian, Kievskaya Rus, which is Kievan Rus. And that is the home of the Slavic state that we now call Russia. That is the ancestral home culturally. So there's a lot of emotional baggage attached to the reconquest of the Ukraine, and I just don't see the military assets available in the West to prevent that from happening.
When you say Slavic and European, what's the difference in where they want Russia to join the Europe organization there, and Russia hasn't joined? Why? The Slavic nations, and what's the difference there? Is it religious or financial?
Well, I suppose it's odd to talk about European tribes, but there were European tribes.
Yeah.
And the Slavic people,
they were the low class. Is that right?
No, I wouldn't put it that way. But the tribes were the Angles, who are the British, and the Franks, who were the French, and then there were the Teutons, who were German, and so forth. The Lombards in Italy, and the Slavs are the people that we normally associate with the Czech state, the Slovak state, Ruthenians, Russians, Serbs, Croatians, Poles, and so on.
Right. Well.
And they speak a similar language.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
They speak similar languages.
Yeah, they speak similar language. And what happened? This nation itself the people that I would say European nations like England and France, they actually, when they say Columbia discovered America, you talk about Italy and all of that, but they actually sent the low working class to United States.
You know, there is an argument to support that, especially in the case of Poland. What we're talking about are people who were working on the farmlands,
Right.
And the wooded areas in the eastern part of Poland.
Well, that's right.
But I think on a larger scale, what we're talking about are the Slavic peoples who did not benefit from the Renaissance.
Okay.
And those, if the Renaissance did not touch your country and you're Slavic, you did have, you were kind of behind the eight ball culturally, and keeping up with Italy, France,
right.
and
Exactly.
Britain and Germany.
And those were the people that really worked America in the beginning. They were the first groups that came over on the boat, you know, the class in the lower part of Europe, the Slavic nations.
Actually, they came from Spain, Portugal, England, France, Germany,
and Italy,
and Italy, and they were kind of pulsed out because of some of the wars that were troubling and roiling Western Europe.
Right, and the royalty, that's and generally the Slavic nations don't have that royalty status like England, France, and Germany.
Well, Russia did, Poland did, and Bohemia, which is Czechoslovakia, did as well.
Right.
Or Czechoslovakia, the Czech state, and the Slovak state. And Austria-Hungary had a number of Slavic peoples in its empire. So, you know.
Okay, then. What we want to do, we've talked about Europe and problems that they have, and the way I look at it, they're going to continue to have problems because they're not just economic problems, they're religious problems. So a lot of that's not going away in centuries. That's the way I just look at it, you know. But what I want to do is get into Africa and Nigeria. Nigeria is one of the most productive African nations. Now, they're having election coming up, and they are very close to the United States and the Western world. But what is the problem that they have?
In a word, corruption.
Corruption.
Corruption is a problem partly because Nigeria is a state divided into roughly three parts. There's a northwestern part that's largely Islamic. There's a northeast. There is an eastern part that is.
But that's where the wealth
Catholic.
Is. The oil is in the northern part of Nigeria.
It's in the south. It's in the southeastern part.
Southeastern part.
Right.
Okay. Whatever section I think they're divided, corruption is divided by the ability to really work those things that they have. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's where the money is.
The oil wealth in the southeast is being tapped by the central government in Abuja, and corruption has come about because oil wealth came to Nigeria quickly, suddenly, like a thunderclap, without the infrastructure to make sure that those assets were used.
Stay in the country.
Stay in the country and were used judiciously.
Right. And which they're really not doing that now. Most of the refineries and things that are in the north, right?
The refineries are actually in the southeast. The refineries that actually work, but most of it is exported to countries that can refine it. There's the upstream, downstream problem.
That had the ability, scientific ability to, actually refine it.
We're talking about a country that just reestablished its railroads.
Yeah. And railroads, we're here in the United States, we know that's the most important thing that you can do in developing a country. You have to have that transportation. And that's one thing that the nation is not really thinking about that. They basically, like you said, well, corruption comes in, and I don't understand this election being postponed. They said the rebels wanted postponed, and then you were telling me no, it was government postponed the election. Give us your opinion quickly.
Well, Boko Haram is the terrorist group that is making it impossible to have presidential, or rather, have elections at this time in Nigeria. They've been postponed for about 6 weeks, pending pacification of Boko Haram. But pacifying Boko Haram is extremely difficult for this government. They haven't been able to do it in a year. So
when you said pacify, what do you mean?
To
give him some of the goodies?
Give some peace to those areas, particularly in the northeast, that are under assault from Boko Haram. So, as I understand it, the president's military advisors strongly suggested that elections be postponed, and he had to agree.
And he agreed because of the fact that Boko Haram has the weapons. Have the people behind him, or what is it that forced him to want to postpone the election?
It's military success and prowess.
Yeah, well,
They've just simply outfought
because
the
people
Nigerians.
are fleeing, going to other countries from there because of the physical problems that they have, the slaughter of people.
Exactly.
Because what happens, it says, with those young girls quickly, they disappear. Oh, what happened? The world doesn't seem to be, I think it's about 12 of them schools concerned with that.
Yeah, some have been liberated, but not all. Certainly not all.
Right.
And if you can't protect your people in ordinary circumstances, how are you going to protect your people when they're exposed trying to vote? So that's the problem.
So that's being physical, really.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Physically protecting your people.
Well, you've heard it on, I want to thank Mr. Braxton here. He's going to be coming back because, hey, the world has plenty of problems, the international problems that are going on. And he's a great source for the Ed Brown Show, the international part of it, because I think this is part of your education too. You have to know the history of the world, not just black history. It's black history, but hey, look, you have to find out the background of the people that you're dealing with. And in order to do that, you have to analyze things. That's one of my favorite words, and I don't want to thank for being here, Mr. Braxton. And he'll be coming back because, hey, the world got plenty of problems for us to talk about. Okay, see you next time.